Stephen DeSouza is in New York. And what are you seeing this hour, Stephen?
Well, we're seeing an unfortunate pattern emerge, Ian, which is during the day and into the evening, the protests are peaceful. It's about justice, about sending a message. But then as it gets darker, as the night goes on, things get more and more dangerous. You can see this police van behind us just by Union Square, just window smashed, the tires slashed as well. And the protesters that we had been following earlier in the night basically playing a game of cat and mouse with the police officers. So they're trying to catch up with them. They have taken over a bridge at one point in the evening. They took over a highway at another point. There's reports of a dumpster set on fire. And just as we were coming over to this area from Times Square, we saw stores in Midtown with the windows smashed. We saw a drugstore down around the corner from here with the windows smashed as well. And so things are getting much more violent, which is not the same as what we saw earlier in the day when things were much more peaceful.
In New York, protesters are united in their target, the police. But over the last few days, they haven't always been united in their approach. Today in Manhattan, crowds marched peacefully, trying to bring the focus back to their message of justice. But there's also been violence. The last few days and nights have seen police vehicles burned, buildings damaged, hundreds of arrests, and dozens of officers injured. The city is also still reeling from this on Saturday, an NYPD cruiser plowing into a crowd of protesters. The mayor says he didn't like what he saw from police. There will be a full investigation, but he and the police chief also chastised protesters.
That situation was created by a group of protesters blocking and surrounding a police vehicle.
There are protests and there are mobs, and I saw akin closer to a mob.
But protesters say it's the police inciting violence, like this officer ripping off a mask to pepper spray someone. The mayor insists that police have shown restraint. He has resisted calls for a curfew, saying it's only a small number of instigators causing violence.
Some come from outside the city, some are from inside the city. Some are from the neighborhoods where the protests take place, some are not. But what we do know is there is an explicit agenda of violence.
Last night, some protesters blocked a group from vandalizing a Target store in downtown Brooklyn. That, many say, is not the point. It's about the daily confrontations that people of color have with police.
I've been stopping frisk nonstop from the ages 15 to 20.
Throw into the mix anger over the impact of the coronavirus on minority communities, and New York is as volatile as it's been in a long time.
And Stephen, back to that point you mentioned earlier, that as the night gets longer, there seems to be more unrest, even violence. Do you have any idea why that's been happening each evening?
Well, it's hard to pinpoint an exact reason. I mean, we see this in other protests as well, where the cover of darkness gives, more. It amps up people. It gives them sort of a sense of courage to do these kinds of things. And so you start to see smaller groups that can move a lot faster, that are braver and want to confront the police officers. And you see, the groups that make up the larger portion of the population during the day, where in some cases you see families, you see younger people, you see older people with the crowds. They have gone home by the end of the night. And so what you're left with is that element that, as you heard the mayor describe, in some cases isn't even from New York, but in other cases they are. In fact, one of the people who was arrested for allegedly throwing a Molotov cocktail at a police officer the other day is a lawyer in town who works on one of the community boards, so a neighborhood council. So it's interesting to see the dynamic of who's involved, how they're involved. Of course, the mayor is also talking about anarchists playing a role in this. But right now, on the streets of New York and Brooklyn, we're hearing reports of police rushing crowds to break them up and affecting arrests there. And then you're seeing this, where you're seeing large groups of police officers moving throughout the city to try to catch up to where the protesters have been, and to now, I guess you can call them rioters, because they are destroying vehicles as well as buildings and going out throughout the night. It's no longer about the message now. It's really about just going after the cops and confrontations with the police.
Stephen DeSouza live in New York City tonight. Thank you.